but what we're born for we must bear. Our frail condition, it is such, that what to all may happen here, if 't chance to me, I must not grudge. Else I my state should much mistake, to harbour a divided thought from all my kind, that for my sake there should a miracle be wrought. No, I do know that I was born to pain, misfortune, sickness, grief, but I will bear these, as shall not need thy false relief.
Good morning, everyone. Hope you're all having a wonderful day today. As you can probably tell, today we're going to be talking about the Vortex Sparc AR red dot. Now, this is a pretty excellent red dot, and I do want to say right off the bat that I did spend my own money on the optic. So I bought it from, I believe, Optics Planet, or actually Bowtac.com for like 180 bucks a while ago. That being said, though, you can actually find this red dot on Gun Deals, and you can find it for $129.99 shipped with a coupon code. Now, if you don't know, Gun Deals, they do sponsor the channel. They do help me with a lot of my ammo budget, so I do want to give them a shout out. If you don't know, they don't buy or sell anything. They merely direct you to the best prices on just about everything on the internet. So if saving money and finding the best deal is as important to you as it is to me, then go ahead and check them out via the link in the description. And of course, you can just type it into your search bar. Now, it's important to remember they don't sell anything. They don't take your money. All they do is just direct you to the best prices in the industry. And of course, if you want to help me out personally, you can, of course, like, share, and subscribe. All that sort of stuff is free. You can also comment literally anything down below, and you will make the YouTube algorithm a little bit more happy. On top of that, I have all of my AR500 steel targets back in stock, so if you want to check those out, I also have hangers back in finally. Now let's go ahead and talk about the Vortex Sparc AR. Now, I do want to say that this is slightly different than most other red dots, and it's going to be kind of unique, and there are a lot of features that kind of set it apart. On top of that, there was an early version of this red dot that only had a battery life of about 5,000 hours. However, the new ones run at about 50,000 hours. So exceptional standard battery life of about 5 years on a medium setting. I believe Vortex says that it is on setting 6 that you get 50,000 hours of battery. And on top of that, one of the standout features for me is the fact that it does not use a 2032. It actually uses a standard AAA battery. Now, I have a ton of these stocked up. I'm actually currently using one of the really nice lithium rechargeable batteries, so my battery life probably isn't going to be exceptional, but it is of course rechargeable, so they'll basically last you forever. So I do like the fact that it uses AAA batteries versus 2032. They're a lot more common to find. Depending on where you are, you might not be able to find a 2032, but you're always going to be able to find a AAA battery. And of course, that means that there is no side battery compartment. There's no top battery compartment. The way that they have it designed is actually inside of the mount itself. Now, we'll get onto that later, but that is actually going to be one of the standout excellent features of this red dot. Now, something that you might also notice on here is it does have this very thick rubberized cover on top, you can absolutely take that off. Now, I've opted to leave it on for all of my testing. It adds about 1 ounce to your overall red dot, which weighs about 7 ounces, so you're not sacrificing a whole lot in terms of weight, and it is going to save the body from some scratches and theoretically reduce some of that impact and soften some of the blows if you were to drop it, which of course we have dropped this optic several times at this point. Now, to get some of the base boring statistics out of the way, as I mentioned, it's about 7 ounces with the red dot by itself, which is a little bit heavier than some of the super slim ones, but that also has to do with there's a lot of material here, there's a lot of girth on here. It is of course a 2 MOA red dot sight. I believe it has 12 different brightness settings. It has 2 night vision settings and 10 daylight settings. Generally speaking, I run it on setting 8 or 9 because it is an exceptionally bright red dot. I'll be rolling in footage of that sort of stuff, but the red dot itself gets extremely bright. So bright that it has a huge halo on it. Even outside, we're in direct sunlight up here in Capitol Forest, and even out here, just the brightness on it is insane. Way more bright than you would ever need. It blooms out to like you know, like a 10 MOA with a big red circle around it, which is fine, yeah, because I never run it on the max brightness anyways. But if you have it set to the appropriate brightness level, you're not really going to get that halo effect around it. And I found that using it in conjunction with a magnifier is actually very, very precise. And I've been able to take shots out to 300 yards very easily, very consistently with this red dot without issue. Now, as you may have already noticed, it does not use a standard like Aimpoint T1, T2 mount pattern. It uses its own integrated mount, which can be a bad thing if the mount is not very good. But we'll go ahead and talk about that now. The testing that I've done on this optic is not as much as I would like to in terms of round count. I like to be well over 1,000 rounds, but currently we're sitting at about 750, 800 rounds, somewhere in that range. I've tested it on this. This is my 16-inch Palmetto State Armory, very, very budget upper. Not very pleasant to shoot, actually violently overgassed, and the more I shoot it, the less I like it. I've also shot it on my 10.5 by Bear Creek Arsenal, their new Gen 2 side chargers, and I'm also shooting it on the Roscoe 12.5 and the Bear Creek Arsenal 11.5 barrel that I'm testing out on another upper. So I have tested it on a lot of different 5.56 guns, and it's worked exceptionally well. The zero has not shifted. The standard height mount that is on here is an absolute co-witness, so like a 141, and then they have a shim that you can install. Now, I'm not a big fan of shims. That will put it to the lower 1/3 height. Now, the entire time that I was testing it, I was either using it as its absolute co-witness, as you see it here, or I was using it on a 1/2-inch riser by UTG. So a lot of the testing that I was at, it was actually at like 191 or 141. I prefer the 191 height, or just, you know, anything that's in that 1.9 to 2.1 inch height that is very, very comfortable to shoot very quickly on AR. Now, before we go too much further, I do want to say that this is going to be a enthusiastic recommend because of the testing that I've done on it. And because it has an integrated mount, I really wanted to test that mount and see if it would hold zero. So because I used it with the riser and without the riser, I decided to do the double drop test twice, both with the UTG riser and without the UTG riser. So once just on the mount on the Sparc AR by itself, and once of course with that UTG riser. Now, because I use a Wheeler fat wrench, which is basically just a torque wrench designed for like AR type stuff, everything was torqued down appropriately to spec, and you know, everything mounted very, very well. I did not Loctite everything because most of the time you don't need Loctite as long as everything is torqued down properly. So with everything torqued down properly, I first went ahead and did the double drop test with the Sparc AR, did a control group, a 5-round control group, double drop test with the UTG riser installed, which again puts it up to that 191 height, which I find very, very comfortable to shoot with. So and then did another 5-round group. Both 5-round groups were in the identical location. There was no noticeable shift in zero, nothing that I could ascertain other than, you know, me pulling shots, because I was using this low receiver, which has a very, very heavy mil-spec trigger. And then I wanted to test it with, of course, not the UTG riser. Again, drop it 2 more times. So again, another control group with just the optic mounted straight to the upper receiver. Double drop test, 5 more rounds, and again, no shift in zero whatsoever. So as long as your red dot is mounted appropriately, this thing here is exceptionally solid. Now, the only thing that I did not test was with the shims, just because I'm not a fan of shims in general. Just in theory, I don't like the fact that there's just a piece of metal in between that's just kind of sandwiched in by pressure, and there can be tiny shifts in there if it were to take a sharp impact or something. So I don't ever use shims really. But it is there just in case you wanted to use it. But I do want to say that the mount, the optic, all that sort of stuff passed with flying colors in terms of retaining zero, both through recoil and through 4 separate drops. Now, the drops are, of course, shoulder height. In this case, 2 on the top of the optic and 2 on the side of the optic, just to kind of give it some different impacts and to see if it moves one way or the other. Generally done on 2 layers of tarp over top of gravel. Now, the reason I add the tarp in there is because the gravel has exceptionally, it can come down to a very, very fine point, so it can put all of that energy into a singular point. So if you put the tarp over, you kind of even out that impact a little bit. Gravel can be a little bit more difficult because you can get a sharp piece that basically takes the entire impact of the optic, and that can make it seem like it did more damage than it really did. So just the fact that it holds zero exceptionally well, even after very, very aggressive drops, 4 drops, no damage to the optic whatsoever. There's some places where the hard coat anodization is worn off a little bit, but other than that, exceptionally good performance out of the mount and of course the internals as well. Now, I did mark off the turrets with some red permanent marker just to check to see if they shifted at all, and they did not. So both the windage and elevation turrets handled the impact very, very well. And of course, because of the design of this optic, everything is covered up, you know, what they call their armor or whatever, and so they are very, very well protected. So, and that of course in conjunction with the rubber armor, I'm not sure if that's really helping at all, but it did perform exceptionally, so I am going to leave it on. Now, there are a couple slight drawbacks to the optic, and I do want to let you guys know because these can be bigger drawbacks to certain people. The clicks on the windage and elevation are both 1 MOA. Now, some people with red dots, they really, really like to see half MOA adjustment so that they can make very, very precise zeros, which in some cases I do understand. However, with a red dot, even if for whatever reason you were as far off on your zero as possible, it's either going to be half MOA one way or half MOA the other way if your mount just somehow perfectly lined up in the center of where it should be. Not a big issue in my opinion, especially when you're only going to be shooting out to 3, 4, even 500 yards. Remember, at 500 yards, that's only 2.5 inches. If you miss your target by 2.5 inches at 500 yards, assuming that it's a large enough target, it's not the optic's fault, it's yours. So 1 MOA does not bug me at all, especially in most of the time that I'm using this. It's like 50, 60 yards and in. Half MOA, again, not going to make that difference. And the second minor downside is going to actually be the refresh rate on the optic. I'm pretty sure it's not because of my battery. I've tested it with a couple different batteries and it exhibits the same thing, but basically it has a suboptimal refresh rate. If you move it really fast, you can tell that it's not 100% solid, so the refresh rate is probably somewhere between 45 and 60 hertz, where you would like it to be like 100 to 150, 60 plus hertz. So it is a little bit, I don't want to say flickery, but you can definitely tell that there is some almost looks like motion in the dot when you're moving, because of course when you move it really quickly you can see that the dot is not like a laser beam, it's more a little bit more intermittent. Now, that will in no way ever slow you down. You will never be able to outrun the red dot. It is merely a thing that you will notice while using it. Unless you're some sort of robot AI, there is no way that you will be able to outrun the refresh rate on this red dot. It is just something that you should notice. Now, you can see through all of the footage that I've been shooting it, the slightly slower refresh rate, the noticeably lower refresh rate, has not impacted my speed whatsoever. And what is actually more important than all of that is the fact that the glass on it is very, very good. It's probably the second best red dot glass in this price range. The SIG Romeo 5 still has basically the best glass. It's basically perfectly clear. That's the reason I keep buying them and I keep using them, is because they have exceptional glass and all of the features at basically a very, very low price tier. The only, well, actually the two advantages that this optic has to that is, one, the integrated mount does not suck, and it uses AAA batteries versus 2032 batteries, which I prefer the AAA. So there are some downsides to this optic. However, excellent glass, top tier durability, AAA battery, integrated mount that does not suck. You do not need to buy another mount when you get this optic. It's just going to run for you out of the gate. On top of that, there's some other things that I like about it construction wise. For instance, there is a lot of material covering up your windage and elevation, so that they are very, very well protected. On top of that, if you look up front, I'll show you some B-roll of this, but it looks like your front lens is very, very close to the front of the optic, and it's not really recessed at all. And that can actually be an issue because, of course, if that glass is very far forward, it's more likely to take an impact if you were, say, moving in and out of a car, through your house or something, or even like through the woods like we're in right now. It is much more likely to actually take an impact. However, that front glass is merely sacrificial on the Sparc AR. So you can gouge that front glass, you can even cut it out. The actual lens portion of the glass is set about a ½ inch behind that. So you have an extra layer of protection on the front end of your glass, and in my opinion, maybe that's where the slightly lower brightness comes in. It is the tiniest bit tinted blue, though when you're out here in perfectly good sunlight like it is right now, you will not be able to notice it. So there's a lot of things going on with this optic that make it super tough, super durable. Again, 50,000 hours of battery combined with AAA batteries makes this work exceptionally well. A couple other quick things before we get done is that the adjustment method on here is an up and a down button on the back. Very, very simple. However, they are fairly stiff. They're tactile, but they're fairly stiff, and they're also very close together. So if you're using gloves, it's going to be a little bit more difficult to adjust them. A very minor complaint: if you hold the down button, it will turn off. On top of that, something that I haven't mentioned is that it does have an auto 12-hour shutoff. So it doesn't have an auto on, but it does have 12-hour shutoff. So even if you leave this on for long periods of time like I do, I don't ever actually turn it off. I just let it turn itself off. It will turn off after 12 hours and save your battery life. Now, if an optic does have an auto off, I prefer it to be at least 12 hours. The reason for that is because if you use this on a home defense gun, you set it to the brightness you want before you go to bed, and as long as you don't sleep for 12 hours, it will be on the entire night, and then off until the next night when you go to bed, and you make sure that it's on the right setting that you want. So for me, I either prefer something with really good auto on, auto off, shake and wake, whatever you want to call it. But an auto off that's at least 12 hours is also acceptable, though again, sometimes I prefer just it to be on constantly because again, I have 50,000 hours of battery life, so I'm not really worried about running out. That being said, it can of course be a nice feature if you're someone who has a lot of different guns, doesn't necessarily get to shoot them all that often, and so you maybe shoot this gun like once or twice a year, you just throw it back in the safe, and of course it turns off to save your battery life. So of course, while the battery life is rated at 50,000 hours, if it's off most of the time, your battery life is essentially as long as that battery can still hold a charge. So we're talking a decade and a half. So guys, there's not all that much more to say about the optic itself. It is really, really good. It's exceptional in just about every category, and again, it is one of the few red dots under $200. Most of the time you can find it for about 150 to 180 bucks, and if you look on gun deals, you can always of course find the best deal. But for that money, you're getting a red dot that is good to go out of the box and is going to last and withstand anything that you can throw at it. So guys, that's about it for the video. I hope you all enjoyed and learned something useful about the Vortex Sparc AR. In my opinion, it's basically either the best or the second best. It's basically 99% as good as the SIG Romeo 5 in most ways, and better than it when it comes to its actual mount, which is of course excellent, as I have already explained. So that's about it for the video, guys. If you want to help out, you can of course like, share, and subscribe. All that sort of stuff helps out quite a bit. You can also comment literally anything down below. Check out Gun Deals. They are sponsoring the channel, helping me shoot more. And if you want some AR500 steel plates, go ahead and check out my website. That being said, guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace off.